Greetings, programs. Welcome to a new audiobook from me, Trekonomics by Manu Sadia. I thought I'd do this one as it seems a bit less complex than the other one with all its complicated formulas that I have to work out how to speak, and also this one's a bit more economical, which is more my interest as of late. So in case you don't know, Trekonomics is a book about future economics, very lefty looking, and it's about how that future works. So it's something nice to look forward to rather than, drama, capitalism's going to kill us all. And this first part is episode 0. Mostly intros and stuff. So let's begin. The inscription reads, "To Lazar, our chief engineer, and to my father, Yosef Sadia." And we begin with an Isaac Asimov quote from iRobot. "I have shown how the ideas of progression and the indefinite I have shown how the ideas of progression and of the indefinite perfectibility of the human race belong to democratic ages. Democratic nations care but little for what has been, but they are haunted by visions of what will be. In this direction, their unbounded imagination grows and dilates beyond all measure. Here, then, is the wildest range open to the genius of poets, which allows them to remove their performances to a sufficient distance from the eye. Democracy shuts the past against the poet, but opens the future before them." Alice de Tocqueville, Democracy in America. It no longer seems so important whether the world was Adam Smith or Karl Marx. Neither made very much sense under the new circumstances. Isaac Asimov, iRobot. Foreword by Brad DeLong. "Live long and prosper. Beam me up, Scotty. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. Fascinating. Make it so. Logic is the beginning of wisdom, not the end. I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer. Highly illogical. Can you stop it? Stop it? I'm counting on it." Over the past half-century, Star Trek has woven itself into our socio-cultural DNA. It provides a set of powerful, striking, and beneficial ideas to help us here in our civilization think better. Even those of us who are economists. Why should the imaginary dreams of science fiction help us think better? Back in 1759, a man who was to become the first economist, young Adam Smith, a Scottish moral philosopher on the make, wrote in his theory of moral sentiments of how a stranger to human nature, seeing the indifference of men about the misery of their inferiors, would conclude that pain must be more agonizing, and the convulsions of death more terrible to persons of higher rank than to those of meaner stations. There is no such alien stranger. Smith is telling us of somebody who does not exist. It's a very short 18th century science fiction story. Why? Because we love to tell one another false stories. To converse about imaginary people, be it in philosophical treatises or in television series. That's what we do as humans. If an alien intellect, vast, cool, and unsympathetic, or vast, warm, and sympathetic, were to scrutinize us from afar, it would inevitably conclude that telling each other false stories was a major part of what we are, and it would wonder why we communicate or miscommunicate in this way. Everyone is engaged in dream work. Everybody chatters about their imaginary friends. Some are ascribing agency, motivation, and intelligence to patterns of societal forces that are the emergent properties of distributed interactions. Others are writing or filming fiction. Our fictions are, collectively, the dream work of humanity. We dream these dreams to amuse ourselves, but also so that we will be more sane when we awake. No wonder, then, that investors and economists also gab about imaginary friends, frenemies, and unfriends, with names like Mrs. Market, and Confidence, and Global Risk Tolerance, as they try to understand these things called asset prices. They are doing dream work. But, in some ways, the most profound thinking, the deepest dream work, is being done by science fiction. That's because science fiction writers and fans are explicitly aware that what they are engaged in is humanity's dreaming. The prime directive of Star Trek, the original series, was a way to process America's 1960s misadventure in Vietnam. I first recognized that Star Trek was a very different kind of show back in the 1960s, when, at the end of Arena, Kirk neither killed, nor civilized, nor brought democracy to the Gorn, but let him go to make his own destiny. Gene Roddenberry mostly wanted to find a way to get people to pay him to make up stories, so that he wouldn't have to take a job that required a lot of heavy lifting. But he also wanted to tell particular stories. The stories he wanted to tell were those that would be dream work for a better future. He wanted to tell stories of a progressive humanity. He wanted to tell stories about people in a better future in which governmental institutions were smart enough to stay out of Vietnam and people weren't obsessed with leaky roofs and food shortages. He wanted to tell stories in which racial prejudice was as silly and stupid as it in fact is. He wanted to tell stories in which it would be normal for a woman to be, if not number one, at least number two, as first officer of a starship. He wanted to tell stories in which everyone, even the disposable red shirt, was an officer, a trained and well-educated professional, treated with dignity and respect by her peers and superiors. In turn, Gene Roddenberry's successors, showrunners, writers, actors, set designers and all the rest, took on the same project, to do the dream work of a better future. As North Atlantic civilization bobbled the historic opportunity that was the collapse of the Soviet Empire, Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, and Star Trek Deep Space Nine pointed to better directions. Gene Roddenberry made Star Trek a collective dreaming about a better future, and not just a Western or medieval romance with lightsabers, whooshing spaceships, and exploding planets bolted to it. 400 years ago, in almost all human societies, being rich relative to your neighbours mattered a lot. If you weren't rich, you were malnourished. Perhaps not getting the nutrients for your immune system to function well. Perhaps not getting the calories you needed to reliably ovulate, and possibly losing at least one tooth with every baby. And you were short. In the 18th century, Adam Smith's England was the richest country in the world, yet orphans sent to sea by the charity that was Marine Society were close to 8 inches shorter than the aristocrats' sons sent to Sandhurst to become army officers. Plus your roof leaked. Today, in the prosperous North Atlantic, food-related public health problems are no longer predominantly problems of malnutrition and caloric scarcity, but rather problems of overabundance. And it's not just in food that those in the developed world's bubble have abundance. You only have to go down to Long Beach and look at the containers being unloaded to convince yourself that our current economic problem is not one of need. Roddenberry's dreams, Star Trek's dreams, help us to think through what it would be like to have a society of abundance, of logic and reason and inclusion. A world in which the fearsome Gorn might really be the good guy, and in which mortal enemies can become allies. As Aelborn forecast to Captain Kirk in The Errand of Mercy, you and the Klingons will become fast friends. You will work together. For those of us who are fans, it has been, and still is, a wild 50 years ride. And for those of us who are not, I believe it really matters to listen to Star Trek's dreamwork and step into that ongoing 50-year conversation. And so, with enthusiasm and admiration, I present to you Manu Sadia and Trekonomics. Brad DeLong, Berkeley, January 2016. Here ends the introductory blurb. There's not much for me to say here because it's just an intro, so I'm going to stop here and move on to the next bit straight away. Bye for now.